Right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining the NOA webinar today, where we're really lucky to have ROH and SWLEOC's GIRFT Elective Hub accreditation teams. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Come along today in real NOA style to collaborate and to share their experiences of going through the accreditation process. Give you some hints and tips. Next slide, please. Sorry. We have 4 speakers with us today. We have from ROH, we have Marie Peplow, who is the executive COO, and we have Michelle Hubbard, her colleague, who is the deputy COO at ROH. They're going to share their journey, their accreditation journey, right the way through from when they made their first decision to apply through to celebrating the success at the end. And I understand the only way in ROH to celebrate success is with cake. And I think that's the only way to celebrate anything, really. So they're going to cover why they did it, how they did it, the documentation they used, and then finally what to expect on that day, that kind of accreditation day. Then we're going to hear from Mary, who is the MD at SWLEOC Elective Orthopaedic Centre, and Iram, who is the Research and Outcomes Manager. Both have been really heavily involved in the GIRFT Elective Hub work at SWLEOC, and they will explain, what their particular roles were. Mary's going to talk about their journey, and Iram is kindly offered to share the Elective Hub toolkit that they developed at SWLEOC throughout their process. There'll be time for questions at the end of each session. I understand that we'll be using the question and answer function on Zoom, but I'll keep my eye out in the comments as well, because we don't want to miss any of your kind of really key questions. The webinar itself is being recorded, and we will be sharing it afterwards. So if you have any objections to that, just let us know. Right, so I'd like to hand you over to Marie, who is going to kick the whole process off and talk to us about ROH and ROH's journey. Thank you, Marie, and Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for that great introduction. And yes, cake featured. Can everyone hear me? Cake featured in every aspect of our journey at ROH. There was cake at the beginning, there was cake in the middle, and there was definitely cake at the end. So what we're hoping to do this afternoon, thank you for inviting us, Anne, onto the webinar, is to share our experience here at the ROH. And hopefully pass some nuggets of learning on, and also learn from others, particularly SWLEOC on the course. I'd be really interested to see their talk as well. So the first thing for us really is to say that my name is Marie Peplow. I think we've been introduced, Chief Operating Officer, and I've got beside me Michelle, who actually did all the work, the Deputy Chief Operating Officer. And we've called our talk An Unexpected Pleasure. And I hope through the talk you'll realise what we mean by that, because we embarked on this journey with some trepidation, because the timescales are quite tight in delivering this route to accreditation. So there was some trepidation in that, but actually we found an unexpected pleasure through the journey, and hopefully that you'll see that come through as the presentation progresses. So next slide, please. So why did we do it? Why did we put ourselves through this, you might ask? Well, we provide a trust with a clear framework of standards. What we wanted to do is ensure that we had a clear framework which we could work to. We knew at the ROH, as we all do, that we deliver great care for patients. We knew that we come to work every day to deliver this great care, but are we delivering best practice? And we felt that by embarking on this accreditation, that would really help us understand that. We wanted to provide a visible marker of those high standards that could be communicated to our patients and really importantly our staff, because as I said, everyone does a brilliant job. We wanted to make sure that we were able to absolutely say that we had an endorsement of that by the GIRFT team and NHSE. And we wanted to enable ourselves to take up more offers in terms of the hub. So post-COVID, the ROH have delivered a significant amount of mutual aid. We've delivered 2,500 patients for the BSAL system, transferred across to ROH. So we wanted to continue on that journey, continue to be a centre of excellence that takes patients from wherever, so that we can offer the best patient care. When I say wherever, it's not just BSAL, we take patients across from the whole country. So ring fencing as well was part of the criteria. We wanted to ensure that we continue to be ring fenced. We're part of a system in BSAL. We have a really big acute trust, 2 acute trusts in our system. We wanted to make sure that we stayed ring fenced, particularly when the winter pressures came. We wanted to be able to continue to deliver great elective care. Next slide, please. So as I said, we think it presents a significant improvement tool to improve the flow and outcomes together of our patients. And as embarking on the journey, each element of our patient pathway came together. And we really do feel that that has improved the flow for our patients, because actually people that perhaps haven't talked to each other before, our porters, our facility staff, we're all in the same room, trying to show the very, very best of our service. And that created a real unity amongst our colleagues and at the ROH. And also our system partners, because on the day we had our system partners who came along, and they also supported the accreditation process, which I think the team from GIRFT found quite unusual. So we were quite pleased with that. We wanted our teams to be recognised for the excellent work they do, our time to shine, and it really was our time to shine. People were ready to show the very best of what we offer. On the right of the screen, I won't play the video, but there's a really useful video for our patients. So patient information about what an elective hub is and what you can expect. And I would advise you to use that. We're going to put it up in our waiting room going forward. Now we've become accredited. But for the purposes of time, I won't go through the video. Next slide, please. So preparation, how did we prepare? Well, we attended the onboarding session, which was really, really helpful. We took lots of notes on the 30th of March, and the team gave loads of information about what to expect. It was a little bit daunting because the number of standards we had to provide evidence for seemed huge at the time, but the team were very careful in saying that this is a journey and you know, we want you to come on this journey. So we needed to understand the process and the timescales and draw ourselves up a plan, and so that helped with that as well. And we appointed the operational lead, who was Michelle, the SRO, myself, and we had great support from our clinical lead, Matt Ravello, maybe on the call. I'm not sure if he's made it today. And obviously we needed to deliver standards against the 5 domains that you'll be really familiar with: patient pathway, staff training and wellbeing, clinical governance and outcomes, facilities intensive, and that really important one at the moment, that productivity and utilisation. So I hand over to Michelle to talk you through the next part of the process.
So yeah, as the operational lead, I had the task of pulling together all of the information required to submit for the ROH in terms of our accreditation documentation, really. So we started by pulling together a project charter in line with the quality service improvement redesign framework. So that includes things like aim, objectives, project rationale, people involved, is there any cost associated with it, and what we wanted to deliver in terms of our objectives. And the key part of that really was the project group. Who did we really need to engage with to support us on this journey to ensure that we show the ROH in the best possible light to ensure that we managed to achieve our accreditation. We had a copy of the criteria. It was quite daunting when we first looked at it, with 39 essential red criteria that we absolutely must meet to achieve the accreditation, 63 desirable black criteria and 3 new standard green criteria. And of course the ROH, we wanted to meet all of those criteria regardless of whether they were new or not. So we set our task of basically having them all as essential criteria that we must achieve. That was a total of 105 criteria, so by no means an easy task. That's a lot of evidence to provide to show that we actually deserve that accreditation. So I pulled together my project group, I reviewed and shared the criteria with the key stakeholders, and then we sort of worked out how to allocate the work. We broke it into 5 domains, appointed an operational lead for each domain to chase the evidence and make sure we got everything that was required, worked out how we were going to store the documentation so that we could check our progress against it. And each 5 domains also had some clinical support assigned to it, whether that be medical or nursing support. Then we pulled together a draft action plan for each domain. So as I mentioned, each domain has its own level of criteria split into red, black and green. So I've just put an example here of one of the criteria in domain 2, which is around the robust ring fencing applied to the hub staff. And the specific criteria, these were black criteria that the chief exec tripartite decision required for breaking of ring fence of hub staff, and winter emergency pressure plans in place to avoid hub cancellations. Now, although ROH is a standalone hub, we do support our system partners and have been known to in the past support over winter. So we had to be very sure on our plans in terms of maintaining that robust ring fencing with the information available to us. So we worked out that we needed to get the system level 4 plan in the event of winter escalation and have dialogue with our system colleagues to ensure that that ring fence isn't broken without any authorisation or decision by the chief executive and our board to maintain that status. That was a relatively straightforward criteria, but just an example in terms of how we identified our gaps and what actions we put in place. And we risk rated each of the 105 criteria and then marked them as closed when we felt like the evidence was ready. This allowed me then to extract a very high level gap analysis to keep abreast of progress. So where we had any risks, where we had areas of concern, where we needed to do more work to ensure that we've got the right information to share. As part of the project meeting, I developed an upward report, and I've just put a snippet of the simple information that each domain lead was required to bring, and that was the total number of red criteria, black criteria or green criteria in their domain. This is domain 2. Number that had had evidence saved as an example. This is at the very beginning of the project. And then if there were any issues for escalation, were we concerned about any of the criteria? Did we need any more support? Did we need to inform execs of extra resources required to deliver? One of the really key things for me was around referencing and documentation format. So we'd spent a lot of time pulling together evidence against each criteria, so SOPs, various policies, written evidence, quotes to put into our package. But how we actually pulled that together was probably a bit more challenging because there was so much documentation to sift through. We implemented a quality assurance process, including proofreading and any last minute tweaks. And finally uploaded our documentation on the 26th of May. That was a very long day, making sure that everything was clear and in place and ready to go to the standard that we required. I think Marie's just showing you an example of our pack. That's the pack in terms of the story that it tells against each criteria, not the actual evidence. There was a whole much larger file of evidence that was submitted with that. So the key lessons learned in terms of the preparation for me was identify the domain leads earlier on to get cracking on. I think we were more consumed in understanding the evidence and slightly got lost in that evidence gathering. Have we got evidence for this? Have we got evidence for that? Rather than thinking about how we were going to structure it. So I think key thing, if I was to do this again, is agree the documentation structure in advance and the presentation of it and how you're going to reference each piece of evidence so that each leader, if you split it into domain leads, is clear in terms of how they're saving that documentation, so it's easy for the accreditation team to review the data that you're sharing with them. And the biggest one was the time for proofreading and quality assurance. I mean, bearing in mind the whole timescale was end of March to the 26th of May, so 6 to 8 weeks. And we'd left about a week for quality assurance and prepping, but you find more and more things that you could include to show how good you are and the level of care that you provide is outstanding and excellent, what we want to share with GIRFT. So definitely allow more time for proofreading and quality assurance is our biggest tip. And then what we did up front as well, prior to the team coming in, was we had a strong comms programme running alongside. So they produced flyers, they produced posters saying ROH is aiming to become a surgical hub on the 9th of June. We used the information from GIRFT in terms of what is a surgical hub, why do we want to be a surgical hub, when will we be assessed, who are the clinical leads for the programme, how will we be assessed. If you want to find out more, we had a website that could access via a QR code or via the intranet. And we also shared information in the CEO weekly email update with the team, at team brief, and gave specific information around GIRFT. So the whole hospital was really engaged with this journey and knew that it was coming and what we was wanting to achieve. I'll hand back to Marie.
Thanks, Michelle. So boots were polished on the 9th of June. Jo was up making cake all night, she'll tell you, Anne. We were ready to accept and greet our visitors, and it was a privilege to do so. Just one little anecdote that was interesting on the day. As we met the visitors in the foyer, one of the accreditors, I thought we're doing really well here, because one of the accreditors wanted to charge his car. And he hadn't thought that ROH would have anywhere to charge his car, being quite a small hospital. And I don't know if you know the site, it's quite a small hospital just outside the centre of Birmingham. And so he planned a journey to Lidl near where we are so that he could charge his car. He was delighted to find that as he arrived, our car park attendant, who clearly knew we were being accredited, went over to speak to him and said, yes, absolutely, you can charge your car here. So he left his car charging. So with that, we thought we started the day pretty well with Jo's homemade cakes and the car on charge. We thought we did quite well. So next slide, please. So there's just a timetable of the day. I won't go through it all there. What I would say to you is that it's a very tight time scale. It's sort of 3 hours and it does go very, very quickly. But we broke the day up as requested by the team into sort of welcome refreshments in the boardroom. I was talking to Jane Rooney only last week, and she'd said she'd had some very elaborate breakfast. So we just had croissants and cake, but yeah, you can do what you wish with that one. So it's an introduction by our chief executive, which I'll share with you in a minute, which was a fabulous context. There was then the tours of the areas and pre-admission, elective stay and discharge. There was another little refreshment break, and then there was the breakout for the GIRFT team. And then we got our feedback between 11:35 and 12. And then what we did, which I would advise others to do if you haven't thought about it, was when the team left, we got everybody back into the boardroom that we could in a session over an hour, a drop-in session, where we talked to staff, gave them the feedback and supplied more cake. So that went down really well. Next slide, please. As part of Jo's talk, again, I won't go through the slide, but we tried to focus on the areas in the domain. So Jo gave a really good overview of our staff survey and what we're doing here at the ROH on wellbeing. So that was really went down well and really helpful. And then Jo, next slide, Jo also included in her slides something that we're doing here called seamless surgery, which coincidentally happens to map to the domains of the accreditation. So huge improvement piece in our surgery, in our theatre department, supported by GIRFT around staff and training. So we talked about the human factors training that we did. We talked about utilisation and productivity. We talked about clinical pathways, and in one particular piece that the team were impressed with is around our shared decision making. And that's been led by our medical director, Matt Ravel. And for those of you that are listening to the news this morning, it's a very, very relevant, very current topic for our patients. So that featured highly. Facilities and ring fencing, we've already talked about. And then we talked about the governance, the real-time governance that we'd launched and how we'd got learning from excellence as part of the new PSERF framework. Next slide, please. And then Jo shared our Wiggly Snake, which is our journey through the ROH, right from the beginning, from outpatients, right through to our fabulous rural orthopaedic service at home when patients go home for surgery. Next slide, please. And then we couldn't not share some of the model hospital data. We've got something here called the Model Hospital Club, where we look at data on a monthly basis, and each specialty comes to learn about their data and present some improvements. And so we shared our data, and we were, thankfully, we were somewhere near the top end where we ought to be. So that was helpful. Next slide, please. And then we took a site tour, so admissions and day case, theatres department, and our wards. Now, we had Professor Briggs with us, which was an absolute privilege and great fun, but he does like to talk, so we had to keep him on time. So Michelle and the team are really, really good at moving people along quite swiftly, because it was quite difficult because everyone wants to show how brilliant we were. So I was on a national call the other day, and Jane did say that we did that very well at the ROH. So I don't know what that says about us. We move people along quickly, but we're very efficient. So next slide, please. And then we had an idea, so before our journey, about how we're going to present the piece in the middle, which is where the GIRFT assessors want to meet our staff. We were trying to work out how we might do this, and we agreed together as a team that we'd like to do it along a patient journey, and you'll see that in a minute when Michelle brings her slides. But what I thought we would do was we thought we'd start with a patient and actually end with a patient. So this was the start of our patient I shared at the beginning. I'll let Michelle play the video. This is Paul.
Marie, we're not hearing any sound.
We're not hearing sound. Is that better, Fallon, or have you still not?
No, I still can't hear sound. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Anne, can you hear the sound on the video?
No, I can't hear it either.
Okay, no worries. We will send it out with the presentation, and you can listen to our lovely patient, Paul. So you can kind of get the gist from the slide what the presentation's about. Is Paul's journey through the ROH, through what was a hip operation that Paul had had, and how he'd been looked after by us, and how he'd regained some great independence by having a hip operation. So I'll leave that special treat for you when you have the presentation, and we'll move on. Right, so over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of the day of coordinating the session with the GIRFT team. So once we were back in the room, we split it into 3 key groups because we wanted them to truly see our patient journey through the hospital. So we started with a group at 10 AM, and we had to be very strict on our time. So we had a group lead who was our consultant anaesthetist. And in that group, we started from the referral process. So we had appointments team leader, sister from outpatients, the consultant surgeons in outpatients, and the shared decision making, pre-op assessment sisters, and the anaesthetist around any anaesthetics prior to surgery, and a medical secretary, so that they could be there to answer any questions that the team might have in terms of the pre-admission phase of the journey. I mean, one of the quotes that we had from the day is getting the first step right in the journey is important, and we do that really well at ROH. And that was a member of our team that had shared that on the day, it was so lovely to be in the room and observe the different groups coming in with no prompting, answering the questions in their own ways, and being able to truly reflect what we do here at ROH. I did have to be very tough though, and try and keep to the 25 minutes and move people on, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to stick to time. So it was great that all the staff wanted to be involved, but I also had to politely encourage them out of the room to bring in the next group too. So the second group was around the elective stay, so that was right through from their admission. We included a porter in this group to talk about how the porter support flow through hospital. We had an ODP, a deputy imaging manager, and the consultant surgeons from an operating perspective. So again, the team could ask any questions around the elective stay, and they did ask that and other questions outside of this remit, but the team all responded very positively. And again, we've got some quotes. So we've worked hard to rationalise stock to both improve care and save resources. That linked to one of the criteria and one of the questions asked. And we provided mutual aid to partners and maintained the same level of care and support. So Royal Orthopaedic Hospital has now supported around 3,000 patients from other providers. So we're doing really well as an elective hub, and also supporting our colleagues with reducing waits for patients. And again, it's that slogan, a chance to shine but stay on time, because everybody really enjoyed this experience. And then finally, the last part of the group was the discharge and post-discharge and governance. So in this group, we had a ward sister and HCA, a housekeeper, pharmacy, therapies, and our Royal Orthopaedic Community Services, governance manager, clinical service improvement lead, and senior physio from a patient experience perspective. But most importantly, we had a patient representative, and we were informed that no other organisation has been brave enough yet to have a patient involved in their experience. And this patient was great. He absolutely loved the experience. And his comment was, I couldn't ask for more. They looked after me from start to finish, and that was so lovely to observe and hear in the room. I even got a question myself about ring fencing, even though I was trying to allow the staff to talk, but obviously I responded. We kept it as close to time as possible and continued to move on. So again, best practice from the site visits, preparation sessions. So we had a couple of preparation sessions with the staff, and I'll let Marie share a quote from one of the staff members.
Yeah, so we had one of our facilities team who actually was brought kind of to tears in one of the prep sessions, because she said, we never get involved in this stuff, Marie, and it's really, really nice that you've asked us. So that was the unexpected pleasure for me.
And really good engagement as well. I mentioned earlier on about our pre-visit comms in terms of posters, information wherever possible to staff and team brief, etc., to ensure that people knew what was happening and why, because the team could have spoken to anybody really, and we wanted them to be truly informed in what we were doing and why we were doing it. And we advised the staff to be themselves in the preparation session, and really enjoyed the session, and they did, absolutely. And then we, of course, successfully became an elective surgical hub. We had verbal feedback on the 13th of July and official feedback on the 8th of August, and we're now one of 16, the first in Birmingham to be fully accredited as a hub. So I'll hand back to Marie.
Yeah, so a great day. So when we received, there's an error on that slide actually. The official feedback was the 27th of July. That's totally my fault. So it was slightly earlier. But when we received the recognition that we had been accredited, I was at a wine tasting event on holiday in Spain. So I did raise a few glasses of wine plus the cake, and we were all really, really excited. So a few quotes there. So our chief executive said the accreditation is a marker of incredibly high standards and testament to the hard work of our team. She's incredibly proud of the care we provide, and being a named elective surgical hub will enable us to treat more patients across BSOL. Our housekeeper, as I say, said she was overwhelmed when the team chose me to be a part of the day. And our porter was phenomenal, Les. He actually really impressed Professor Briggs. And he said, I enjoyed being able to share my views of the hospital and the journey to support more patients. He actually, if I'd prepared Les, I couldn't have put words better. He said, if I do my job properly, we'll get more patients through, because there's a big waiting list, Professor. So fantastic, really, really pleasing to see that. And the next slide. So what did they say about us? They said we were a magical environment, which was lovely. There was a huge credit given to both our clinical and our managerial excellence. We were considered a very impressive site, and we are more than happy to share any of this with anybody, any of our documentation, so please get in touch. And the areas of excellence, I think you can see there, we had happy staff, which we did, because what I think the accreditation created was a real buzz around the organisation, a real joining up of care, a real, you know, if I get this bit right, then I can move the patient through to you quickly. Staff were talking about a good safety culture, and they'd had some human factors training, so that was quite timely. So all in all, a really, really positive report. But there are areas for us to improve on, and Michelle, I think on the next slide, is going to talk about how we do that. Oh, so lots of celebrations.
So we celebrated the outcome first, you know, and again, there was lots of comms behind that in terms of Twitter, social media, internally with staff. We gave out samosas and badges within a few days of being accredited, and then myself and Marie Raftery, one of our director of ops, chaired a stand for a couple of hours 2 weeks ago to say thank you to the staff with a little certificate for their contribution in helping ROH become an elective hub, and we gave them brownies and lots of freebies, and the staff really enjoyed that experience. And there's just an example of one photo of the day, because we had, I think, around 250 staff come and visit us to take their certificate and say thank you and talk to us about the experience on the day. It's a really good session. And in terms of the ongoing monitoring mechanisms for us, I now chair a project group which meets fortnightly to review the key metrics against the overall criteria. But we also had a very small hub optimisation plan to work towards. We've got 5 actions on our hub optimisation plan that we need to provide assurance to GIRFT at our regular 3-monthly reviews, but also to our board as well and to the exec team. And the accreditation process requires a formal reassessment in 3 years' time. And really, just in terms of our best practice and sharing, just going back to the earlier points on make sure that you really prepare, that you take time for quality assurance and proofreading, and ensuring that all of the documents are saved in the correct place and they've got the correct reference to check back. And please do not underestimate the amount of time. 6 to 8 weeks feels like a long time, but don't get lost in that evidence gathering. That is really crucial. I'll just hand over to Marie for last words.
I guess the final word is enjoy it, because the unexpected pleasure was by doing this piece of work, we kind of brought the organisation together. We created a real energy in the organisation, and I think both staff and patients have really benefited from that. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on a GIRFT webinar in NOA. It really was a really proud moment, actually, on the day for all of us who were involved. So just enjoy it and embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
And thank you both for taking time to do that for us. I know in like my former life, this kind of thing always frightened the life out of me. You know, anyway, no audit office were coming in or somebody was going, but this sounds like, I mean, and I can see all the hard work. I think the key thing here is the engagement with the staff and how much fun you made it, and you know, how you made it easier for people to go through the process. We've got a couple of questions, but I'll save them until the end. But I just wanted to say, Stacey Keegan from Robert Jones has popped a little comment in the chat to congratulate you and say well done. I just thought it was worth sharing.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you both. So we'll move on now to the SWLEOC presentation. So Mary and Iram, if you'd like to kind of get your screens ready. Mary, I don't think you're going to use some slides. We're just going to hear your story, which is fantastic. Is that right? Hi, Iram.
Hello.
Hi. We're just waiting. Hi, Mary.
Hi there. You can't see me as yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, forgive
we
me.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Start my video. Let's have a look. A bit of a techie problem here. Oh, here we are.
Well done,
Hi. Thank you very much. So Mary, wow, that was very impressive from my colleagues in Stanmore, and a very comprehensive outline of prep and experience on the day. I'm really going to use this session to give some very small bullet points, because I think that the information that you've gathered from Stanmore is very detailed. And congratulations to my colleagues in Stanmore for their successes. So for those of you that don't know, SWLEOC is a much smaller organisation than Stanmore, and it's a partnership organisation where we cover orthopaedic surgery in South London and Surrey for 4 organisations: Epsom and St Helier, St George's, Kingston and Croydon. And we're a partnership organisation that's been in existence for almost 20 years. So I think it's really important to say that for us, this is what we've done for an awful long time. We have been a ring fence facility for years, doing elective surgery only. And we have many visitors coming to, we have many visitors coming to SWLEOC over the years to try and develop a model similar. So we're always open to share what we do here. That said, having a formal accreditation process to undergo was actually very daunting for us, because what you don't want to do is to fail at something that you've been doing for years and years. So my very, very simple bullet points, because I think Stanmore have delivered a lot of detail there, but just to reinforce a few things. I think the first thing is you've got to start early with this process and approach it with the same rigor that you would do if there was an imminent CQC inspection, because it is a formal inspection and you want to be able to showcase your organisation with as best as you possibly can. Identify a clear team. We're a very small team here, so there aren't many people to pull from, but there's lots of very talented people. So it's about identifying people that want to partake in collating the information needed. And what we did is to have a very structured and systematic approach for gathering the information, looking at the domains, what was required, and systematically pulling that together. I think it's a good idea to create your own database information mapped against the criteria, and this way it's very easy to identify the information you've got and also to highlight the gaps. And also, like any process, it's setting goals and deadlines for yourselves in terms of completion of domains. This was very important because the day jobs still continue, and it's very important to give your team some specific deadlines that are realistic, that can be delivered within their jobs. We then put together weekly meetings with myself and Iram and Bodine, my lead therapist, myself, medical director, general manager, to review where we are, where we think the gaps are, and if I'm honest, to get some SOPs together for areas that we were delivering but couldn't necessarily find the information we needed to underpin what we were doing. So they're some just basic headlines in terms of what to do, but I'm more than happy to field any emails or questions from any organisation outside of this seminar today. I think on the day there is a group of about 5 or 6 people that pitch up. We like to celebrate here an awful lot of what we do, and when we initially put the presentation together, it was too long. So what we had to do is really slice out a lot of slides to give a very short, captivating presentation in terms of what we do, and then open it up to the inspectors to feed into us what they wanted to get from the day, where they wanted to go, and who they wanted to see. Similar to my colleagues in Stanmore, the centre knew that we were having an inspection. Staff were freely available to talk to people during the walk around, and we didn't preempt any discussions for our team. We just let them showcase what they do, and they were able to be able to celebrate what they do in all areas, theatres, outpatients, as well as our ward areas. Things that were a particular focus for us, which I think is worth mentioning, is theatre utilisation. I think we're all very much under review currently because of recovery. Recovery is ongoing, and the team are very interested in theatre utilisation, and also in terms of the presentation being capped utilisation, which prior to this inspection we didn't have capped theatre utilisation. So that was one of our objectives, which we've delivered since. So just to give you that as a preempt, you may want to think about how do you deliver your theatre utilisation, what does it look like, and make sure that it is in a capped format. Once you're accredited, we as our Stanmore colleagues, we were accredited a couple of weeks after the event, and we have just finished submitting our first plan in terms of some of the critique that we were given, what actions we were currently taking. One area was obviously to look at capped utilisation, and we've delivered that. Another area, to give you the heads up, which was quite a focus of discussion, was around cancellations. And cancellations is a challenge for all of us in the theatre setting, both from a clinical and a non-clinical, but specifically here, it's more of a clinical scenario. So that has led us to have a bespoke group here looking at other ways in which we can tackle it. One of the suggestions from the visiting team was the whole philosophy around standby of patients, which we do to a degree here, but we're looking to try and do something a little bit more innovative. Another area that was looked into was outpatients. It's always a difficult one when you're being inspected, because it could so happen that it's on a day when you have a few consultants on leave and your outpatients don't always represent how busy you ordinarily are. But one of the actions was to review our capacity to make sure that we were sweating the assets as much as we could and getting as many patients through. And also looking at how we are looking to reduce our weights going into outpatients, how we're embracing PIFU, and some other work that we're doing to streamline patients revisiting. What other things to say? I mean, that's kind of the headlines here from SWLEOC. As I say, I'm more than happy to field any questions offline or to invite people to visit, as we always have visitors here at SWLEOC. But that's my bit, and then I've got the wonderful Iram, who will probably talk in more detail about our storybook.
Hello, I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that? So I'm going to talk about the GIRFT and SWLEOC Elective Hub Toolkit and how to use it to support your surgical hub achieving GIRFT Hub accreditation. So in April 2016, the wait time for referral to treatment had dropped down to 7 weeks. However, owing to COVID, this had been doubled by April 2022. So 50 new surgical hubs have been set to open, and many of you will be aware of that, and which equates to almost 1 million extra procedures in 2024 to 2025. So with these new hubs opening, there was a GIRFT Hub accreditation, which all of you know about, and that's why you're on the call. And the process of this was to assess the hubs against the framework of standards to help hubs deliver faster access to some of the most common high volume, low complexity procedures, such as hip replacement. And then the domains for the GIRFT accreditation, as we've heard today, are the patient pathway, staff and training, clinical governance and outcomes, utilisation and productivity, facilities and ring fencing. So within each of these domains, there's criteria, and within the criteria, there's a checklist. So when you come to doing your GIRFT accreditation, you'll receive a document which has all the domains, the criteria, and the checklist that is required to be achieved, which we've heard from our previous colleagues. So in light of this, we have the GIRFT SWLEOC Elective Hub Toolkit, which was put together with the GIRFT team and the South West London Elective Orthopaedic Centre. So what is the GIRFT SWLEOC Elective Hub Toolkit? Well, this is a toolkit which outlines the must-do critical steps of running the hub, as well as sharing some of the challenges that SWLEOC faced over the years. So it's a document which helps services who are starting from scratch, or expanding their existing hubs, and it's to avoid any sort of potential pitfalls and ultimately get it right the first time. So why SWLEOC? Why was SWLEOC asked to put this elective hub toolkit together? Well, SWLEOC completes over 5,000 orthopaedic procedures a year, more than 3,000 hip and knee replacements. It has an outcomes database of over 60,000 hip, knee and shoulder replacements. But when it first started, it failed to achieve its targets, and this was because of operational bottlenecks. So Professor Tim Briggs got in touch with Professor Richard Field, who some of you may know, who's a consultant orthopaedic surgeon, and invited him to document the processes and pathways to help help new hubs and centres rapidly establish their infrastructure to achieve their service targets with minimal delay. So Professor Field put together a team in order to do this. So the team was put together was myself, my colleague Bodine, my colleague Polly Hyde from the NOA, and then vast members of the entire SWLEOC team worked together in order to put together this online toolkit that was launched. And we couldn't have done this without the support of our director, Mary, and our medical director, Mr. Patel. But how will this support the GIRFT accreditation that your hubs are looking to do? Well, the purpose of this toolkit is to provide a comprehensive standard operating procedure, service level agreements, and other business critical information for GIRFT accreditation. And it's split up into the ways the GIRFT accreditation is, so with patient pathway, staff and services, administration, estates, and then it's got a comprehensive library of appendices. So when you log into the system, you see the GIRFT Elective Hub toolkit, which is available publicly online. You see this, and it's got the domain, so you see all the different domains just across the bottom. So going on to the first one, which is domain number 1, patient pathway. The patient pathway, this highlights all the different areas which are required for the criteria. So patient pre-admission, how we're doing our pre-admission, how we're digitalizing it, how we're communicating with patients. And all this information is documented in quite a lot of detail of how SWLEOC are doing it. So if you do have the time, you can read across it to see how our centres got up all the different processes in place. So the toolkit is split into pre-admission, inpatient, and post-discharge. And then once you click into it, you can go into, so one of the criteria within the domain is referrals to the centre. So you click into our document in the referrals into centre, and you can see all the documents. So we have every part of the patient pathway clearly documented on how SWLEOC does it. So it's a blueprint. So just going back onto the referrals to the centre, one of the criteria is the referral performers that are used by your hub, by your centre. So we have these. So these are all documented on the website for all the different procedures that are being undertaken at SWLEOC. So just taking a hip performer, for example, we can see the hip performer that we use for osteoarthritis at SWLEOC. And then moving on to the inpatient aspect, so the hospital admission. So the hospital admission, every single person that has involvement within the hospital, from the porters, from the administrative staff to the surgeons, everybody plays a fundamental role within ensuring the patient has the best journey possible. So we've documented the entire journey from the patient being transported in all the way to the patient being transported out, and then being followed up with their NJR data and their patient reported outcome data. So just going into one area within the patient pathway, being pre-theatre and the post-operative care unit. So we in the Elective Hub toolkit have documented the critical steps that are undertaken, but not only have we highlighted just the steps and who's responsible, we've taken into account things which you may not think are as important, but for example, what IT infrastructure we need, what different systems we use, how we collect our notes, what electronic patient record systems are we using. All these are sort of behind the scenes that play a fundamental role in ensuring that we have a streamlined service. And then moving on to staff and training. So staff and services is another big aspect within the GIRFT accreditation. And this is just talks about all the different people that are involved within the journey of a patient. So we've got our document which highlights how it works at SWLEOC, how we have a ring-fenced semi-autonomous elective orthopaedic centre, which is based on the Epsom General Hospital campus, but we're a full partnership hospital, as Mary highlighted. But then we talk about every single aspect of the personnel involved within SWLEOC, and we have each area documented. So just going back onto the anaesthetic teams, we asked each member, so we're very grateful to everybody within SWLEOC who provided us with all this information. So we asked them for their background of their information. But what the Elective Hub toolkit also highlights is all the staff that are involved in ensuring that we're able to offer the services that we can. So the staff members, the grade, how many hours they do, what roles they play, what activities they do. And then we also have, what bottlenecks. So we weren't shy in saying, we did have problems, and this is how we overcame our problems, how we overcame the challenges, and what our 5 keys to success tips were. So we can help others achieve what SWLEOC have achieved. And then another big domain is clinical governance and outcomes. So we have a section within the GIRFT Elective Hub toolkit which highlights clinical governance and outcomes. And we have a clinical governance lead, and within the document it highlights what our role is within the team, what critical steps the individuals who are involved within clinical governance take, and their quality improvement. And then we also have documented within the Elective Hub toolkit all the clinical meetings, all the different meetings that take place within the centre. And because clinical governance is one of the domains that is looked at within the GIRFT Hub accreditation, here's just an example of the meeting. Just each one has the frequency, the length of the meeting, who attends the meetings, because the attendees of the meeting are important. So we've got a list of attendees who we think would be valuable to attend these meetings. So for all the different meetings, we've listed these out. And then we have a template agenda of what we discuss in our clinical governance meeting and what would probably be beneficial to other centres, other hubs who are starting up or developing their services. And then we have the meeting minutes. So just an example of our minutes. So the minutes are, in a structured format. We have the same, so people are aware of, what area they can look at, them in the same format. And all this is documented within the Elective Hub toolkit. And then the next section within the same domain 3 is outcomes. Now at SWLEOC, we have quite a unique setup where we have patient-reported outcomes, and we collect these preoperatively at additional time points to what the government collects. So we collect them at the 1 and 2 year time points as well. So our database holds 60,000 hip and knee replacement and shoulder replacement surgeries. So we are in a slightly unique position, but we have documented how we've done it, how we have put this hybrid infrastructure into place, where we store our data, how we store it, what time points we collect the data. And then we've also put on the Elective Hub toolkit for people to view what questionnaires we send out to patients, what letter goes with the patients, what email goes with the patients. So it's open, it's very transparent. People can see how we're doing our processes if they wish to learn from them or use them. And then we have the domain 4, which is the utilization and productivity. So within this, we have SOPs which are documented on the Elective Hub toolkit. And there are quite a few, so there's 130 that we have that relate to the activities that take place at SWLEOC, which highlight the utilization and productivity to support cancellation, on-the-day cancellations, to how we do various different things within the centre. So there's a whole library full of our blueprint of how SWLEOC runs from having the patients, before having the patients, all the way until after the patients are being discharged, and how we can be most productive in making sure that we have a throughput of cases. So these are just some examples of some of our standard operating procedures which are available to be reviewed. And then the last domain is the facilities and ring fencing. So one of the domains is to ensure that there's an area for the elective procedures to take place. Now every site will have their own infrastructure that they have in place. But we've talked about the estate facility that we have at SWLEOC, because it's not just about having the actual estate, the land, but it's also having, one of the things that when we were writing this up, we had to take into consideration, we have to make sure pathology are there, have to make sure various different things are in place and easy access. So we've highlighted our estate. So we have all the different services are documented, from outpatients to inpatients, how we have our X-ray unit. So we have our X-ray unit for inpatients. It's very close to where our patients have have their surgery, and then we have another X-ray unit in our outpatients, which is for the outpatients, so they're completely separate and divided. So we've laid out how much infrastructure and how much estate is required. So if you just have a look at our outpatients, we've documented how our outpatients is laid out, how many clinic rooms we have. And then if you have a look at the theatre floor plan, we have the theatre floor plan, we have how much storage is also required for all the instruments, all the implants that are required. So we've highlighted this on the Elective Hub toolkit, which shows you, for 6 theatres to run, this is how much storage is required. This is where the post-operative care unit are. So all areas are clearly documented on how we run our service, and different hubs can learn from what we have in place and how they can adapt them to use the infrastructure. This is just taking into place the ward plan that we have. So we at SWLEOC have 2 wards, but here we just showing one of the wards of how we've used it and how others can learn from the layout that we have and make use of the space that they have available to them. So in conclusion, we hope that the Elective Hub toolkit will allow new surgical hubs to identify strategies and pathways to avoid any bottlenecks, but ultimately to achieve their operational targets with a minimal delay and provide an efficient service. And we also hope that this will support hubs who are hoping to have their accreditation. So it's the Elective Hub toolkit is designed in a website which is available on the GIRFT website, but it's designed in a format which is split into the 5 domains. It's easy access, it's publicly available. So we highly recommend that you look at how SWLEOC have achieved their success and how they've become a GIRFT accredited surgical hub and what pathways, processes they have in place. And if you have any further details, these are the websites and these are the people who are involved. I would like to thank Prof Field for leading on the project, but also thank Mr. Patel, our medical director, and Mary Richardson for their support in supporting us put this GIRFT Elective Hub toolkit together, and also my colleagues Bodine and Polly who worked with me to put this together. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Erin. That was really good. I was a bit concerned, but you got through it, and it was a really great presentation. So thank you. Lots and lots of hard work gone on there, and I think it's really good today because it's giving. I know Wrightington are already on their journey, but I know some of our other trusts haven't even kicked their journey off yet. So it's fantastic to hear from both SWLEOC and from ROH in Birmingham. Thank you both. There were a couple of questions, but I don't want to put anybody on the spot. But I just thought Joe Williams has been able to join us now, and I wondered, Joe, if you wanted to just say a couple of words. Marie and Michelle did a fantastic job of taking us through, and particularly talking about cakes. But if you had anything you wanted to add, Joe, that would be fantastic. Hi
all, and I just caught the end of the presentation from the team. So thank you to Marie and Michelle and to colleagues at SWLEOC. I guess they've all been really positive about it, haven't they, Anne? So
yeah, very.
This is kind of a question for both of them in terms of if they had the chance in terms of reflecting what they've achieved, was there anything that they'd change now they've had chances? I think Marie's been out and about in terms of helping others in terms of the assessment. So I guess, is this something you would have done different if you've had the chance again now? And then they'll probably come and find me in a bit, Anne, and kick me.
I think I probably would have given myself a little bit more time for the QA, and I think that's probably the key thing Michelle may want to add. But the process at the end, just pulling it together, was really probably one of the most difficult bits of the journey, the most challenging bits. But in terms of the preparation of the teams and the buzz, as you know, Joe, around the organisation, I think that just lifted us so much. We kind of forgot about the couple of late nights we spent on that, because it was really was genuinely worth the hard work, really. Michelle may want to add.
Yeah, I just think from my perspective, it was being clear, I think, earlier on about the structure of that documentation, because we found ourselves with piles and piles of evidence, and then we was like, well, how are we going to sell this to the GIRFT team in a story type format with clear referencing? We didn't allow ourselves enough time for that, and that's the one thing I would change if I was to do it again.
Yeah, Okay. What about SWLEOC? I have to say, Mary, you said something that struck a chord that I know Marie and I spoke about at the start. What happens if you fail? Because this is the bread and butter of what we do. So it does, you are really pretty exposed and put on a bit of a platform. So that struck me in terms of you saying that. But is there anything that you would want to do different?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Joe. So I probably was more nervous than anyone, because I thought, if we don't get this, this is really not good. So I think I had my own pressure with this, but I'm surrounded by a phenomenal team. And I think the other thing that we can't underestimate is we've been at this for a long time. So this isn't new to us, you know, so there was an awful lot of information there. And I suppose my advice to other organisations who haven't been at it for as long is you need a lot of time aside for this, because we were able to pull SOPs, pull policy procedures, so much. We just had a plethora of information at the beginning. So I suppose if I were in another organisation in the infancy of a hub, is creating a really good significant amount of time. And the other thing is, I'm very fortuitous here because I've got my own informatics team, but if you are part of a bigger organisation, you need to give the informatics team the real heads up on this, because they will have their day jobs, and there may be data that they need to pull for you. So that would just be another comment I would make.
Erin, is there anything you'd like to add from kind of your perspective?
I think Mary's covered it all.
Brilliant. We do have a couple of questions, and one of it is kind of, I think you've kind of half answered it already, and that was, somebody asked us, if you could only give us who are just going into this process one piece of advice, what would it be? But I think, you know, you've all said quite clearly, make time and you know, get that time available. There's a more specific question in here, and it's from Cormac Kelly, and he asks, what happens after 2 years of arthroplasty follow-up? How is it done? Who does it? Any long-term follow-up? X-rays, yes or no?
Do you want me to fill that question, Anne?
Yeah, brilliant, Mary. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we're talking about post-operative arthroplasty follow-up. Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and we've started some pilot work here in the centre where we have a digitalised platform for pre-assessment, and what we're doing is using that platform for discharging we discharge patients on day one or the following day, and then what we do is we follow them up with a phone call, and then we follow them up through our digitalized system, asking them to submit videos and to talk to us. So I think the answer is that in order for organizations to have the capacity that they need to do the first appointments, we need to be more creative about follow-up. And 2 years down the line, I don't know if Erin wants to comment on that, but in terms of PROMS data, there's some already very, very rich data nationally in terms of patient outcome. And I think we already have it there. But I don't feel it's the responsibility of an acute organisation to be following patients up 2 years later, as the capacity won't permit that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Mary. Erin, did you want to add anything, or has Mary covered it?
Covered it. So we collect the patient reported outcome measures for 2-year time point, the Oxford PIP score and the EQ5D, and patient reported complications at that 2-year time point. That's the only additional thing that I would add.
There's a question here about, and it's for both SWLEOC and ROH, and that's on the Meet the Staff sessions, did the assessors go to the clinical areas, or did you bring the staff to the assessors in a meeting room or in a separate place?
So if I answer on behalf of SWLEOC, so we let the team go. So they were let loose wherever they wanted to go, so that they could see our clinical staff in their natural areas and they could celebrate what they were doing, etc. that's how we approached it.
Brilliant. Anne-Marie and Michelle.
We did a mixture of both, Anne. So we had the teams go around the different areas, so theatre and ADCO and pre-op assessments, supported by others. So we could, as we said, we could move people through quite swiftly, but lots of discussions with staff, lots of conversations, validating the evidence. And then we brought the team back into the boardroom, and then we brought the staff in little groups to the team. Aligned to the patient journey. So we chose to align it to the patient journey. So we did that kind of 3 sections of, and we brought relevant staff in for each area. But it did work really well because it gave people that kind of intimate conversation, but it also helped with people that were a little bit worried about meeting, you know, assessors. So it was a combination of both.
Yeah, thank you. I'm conscious of the time. There is a question here that I don't know the answer to, and perhaps I should. And that is, how many of the NOA hospitals have accreditation at the moment? Joe, are you aware? And obviously, you know, yourselves as SWLEOC, are you aware of any others?
I'm not even going to guess the number because I think Marie knows it.
Ah, right. Thank
As
you.
any good double act.
There's 16 in total, and there's the first 8 that were part of the pilot, and then there's the second 8 which we were part of. So there's 16 in total. How many of those are NOA members? I'm not sure, but we could easily find out because I've got the list of the 16.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Joe, anything else to add?
The only thing I'd just say, Anne, and clearly I don't know if you've seen the comments, I am biased, and we never know. In Birmingham, people do say it as they do, so you never kind of know what to expect. And we did invite a patient. I'm saying we did, the royal we, Marie and the team decided to. And actually, whilst you could hold your breath and think, what is he going to say? It was really lovely to see him as part of the team. He was so passionate about, he was part, you could see he was almost part of the team. And actually he just was so proud of the care. So we didn't coach him in any way. We literally, I think the only exchange of gifts was Ferrero Rochers that he got when he got in the taxi back to home. But people might want to consider it because actually it does show that joined up care, and I think it did make a difference. But no, thank you, Anne, and thank you to our speakers today. It's been great to hear and hear the excitement that they've all got still around the accreditation process.
Definitely. One last thing before everybody goes. Today's presentations will be shared and the recording will be shared on the members area of the NOA website. There's been a couple of people asking if maybe they could see some of the specific presentations you guys used on the day. And I don't know, you know, if you'd be happy or able to share those.
Yeah.
Maybe if I let people have your details and they can contact you, and then you can let them know what you can and can't share. That might be a good idea. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, last thing for me. Don't forget our conference. Don't forget our awards ceremony. If you haven't already registered, then please do. And when you leave the webinar, there'll be a feedback questionnaire. It'd be great if you guys could fill it in before you go. Thank you to all the speakers, and thank you to everybody who's made time to attend today. I've really enjoyed it, so I hope you all have as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.